Play. There we go. Okay. So we'll officially welcome everyone who's here and those who are going to watch us on replay. And thanks to everybody's patience for allowing to reschedule to today. But I will say that is one nice thing about Zoom classes because at least we have the recording.
Yeah.
And when we had that ice storm a few weeks ago and we had to reschedule an in-person class, then that gets harder because then we had some people who couldn't come to the rescheduled in person and it gets complicated. So it's nice at least this gives us a little flexibility. So thank you for your patience and happy Easter to those who are celebrating Easter.
Happy Easter, happy Greek Orthodox, happy, what else we have? We have we've got something else. What is
I
it?
think it was just Passover.
Passover,
Yeah.
that's it. Yes, it
Yeah.
was. Yes. There we go.
Okay, so first off, do any of you have show and tell of a project bag?
Yes.
Yay! And I'm going to spotlight you so we can see your bag.
Ta-da!
Very pretty. And I like how you changed out and you put the turquoise. That's very pretty in the navy. Yep.
And I want to say something. This is the first time I've ever done the binding on the machine, and I was quite pleased with myself.
Excellent.
I thought this is a small project. I need to try it.
Yeah, no, good for you. Now maybe you gain confidence to try it on a quilt someday.
Well, someday, yeah.
Yep. Thank you, Deborah. I'll remove you. And Kate, we're going to spotlight Kathy next.
Now she's got her full.
I've got my
Already got it full.
Oh wow.
Way to go, Kathy.
Yeah, so going to retreat. I too it was probably the
There it
second
is.
I did the front binding, and I'm not a fan of it. But I tried it.
Okay. Nope. And that's okay. Like I said, you can always go back to attaching it to the front, hand stitching down at the back if that's what you like. That definitely is an option too. Okay. And Trisha, I'm going to spotlight you now.
Yeah. So I've got it filled with other things too.
You're ready for the next session of classes?
I don't think so, but I got to try and figure it out.
Okay. Yes, you're going to figure that one out on your own. You can do it. You'll be able to do it.
And if I have any problems, I can always email you and ask questions.
Yes, you can, ma'am.
Let me zip it.
Okay.
That looks nice. I like how you use the what they call the tiles on that panel and you put it on your front border too. That looks nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fun how people can take the same kit and then do little things to tweak it and change it. So I'm going to spotlight Etta. I saw she had hers there.
Yeah, I made two of them. I made the large and
Yep.
the medium. And I did do some stitching on the front border panel.
Oh, I see that.
Oh, yeah.
Stitches on the machine. It's a needle and thread.
Good idea.
Very nice.
That's
So
very cute. Fun to see that customization. And did I get everyone who wanted?
No, Marina?
Marina is next. Yes.
Okay, well, I made mine a little bit different. I always have to do something different. I wanted a tougher handle,
Mm-hmm.
so I used this one.
Yeah, good idea. You just used some webbing.
Yes.
Yep.
I had made my daughter a table runner, so I was thinking I'd make this for her. So I used the same material for her that I'd already used, where I mixed it up with kind of a fancy
Yep.
zipper pull.
Yep.
And it was my first time sewing plastic. I'd never sewed plastic before. And I'm only on about my third zipper, so that was really easy. I don't know why I was so scared of zippers for so long.
Good for you. Yep. No, now you don't have to tick that off. You're not scared of that anymore.
But I have to say, though, I really do prefer courses in real life.
Yes, me too.
Because your teacher will be standing there and she'll see you do a habit you have, and say, oh, it's like this, and just tweak something. And oh, I
Yeah.
didn't know that, like,
Yes. Yep. Nope. That is definitely a benefit of the in-person. I would not disagree with you on that one. That's the one thing that as a teacher, I occasionally feel frustration if I can see that we're on Zoom and someone's just not getting it. That's when I wish my hands could go into the screen and just say, here, it needs to go together like this,
yes.
Yeah, yeah. All righty. Well, this,
Sometimes you're just putting it under the sewing needle wrong, or like doing something little wrong, like
yeah.
I
But
hadn't sewn for
anytime,
years, and I got my sew machine out and I threaded it, and I did it wrong because it had been a while since I'd done it. And the teacher walked over and picked up my thread and moved it where it should go.
yeah. No, it's definitely true. I've had that experience walking around the class myself before and say, oh, do you always do that way? And then you can kind of talk to a better way about it, or if it's an error like you're threading, you can see it for sure. But anytime you're in class, and you're stuck on something, like don't hesitate to take a moment to move your phone or wherever you need to show me what you're doing. Like, and we definitely will try our best to fix any issues that might come up for sure. Okay, I am going to share my lower screen now, and we'll go over what we're going to do today. So first off, I just wanted to ask, did everyone, if you can give me a thumbs up, did you have a chance to make your bias binding strips? Okay.
I'm looking for thumbs up. Where is that? Under.
Oh, just do it yourself, like your
Oh,
thumb is okay. Yeah, sorry. Yes, and if you are looking for thumbs up, it's
Mhm.
usually it used to show it, yeah, react. You could, if you're on a computer, you'll see a little react with a heart symbol.
Yeah.
When you touch on that, you'll see where you can put your thumbs up and down. No, we're a small enough group, I can see you all on one screen today, so we can just do physical. Okay, so excellent, that's great. So today what we're going to do is, I'm excited because I get to make one of these too. I've already made the ones to show you for the class and to put in our store, but I'm making one to keep for me to use. So I'm excited about that. Oh, sorry, just got to check something on my camera here. Okay. There we go. All righty. So what we're going to do today is we're going to be installing our magnet. So let me just move. I was using my project bag to hold today's work in it. So I'm just going to move that out of the way. And so where we're going to today is we need to, first, we have to make this piece that's on the front, okay? And in here, there is the square magnet, or sorry, there is the square piece sewn in that contains our magnet. So when you look in this case, I have two little squares of SF101. To be quite honest, it does not have to be a fusible interfacing because we're not actually going to iron it on. It's just that you need some little covering over top of your magnet. So it could just be a little piece of lightweight sew-in stabilizer as well. There's flexibility with this. And then we have a pair of magnets. And so this is what I mean by sewing in the square. And these are hard to pull apart. And the trick is slide them rather than starting to pull apart, slide them apart. And oh, it's sticking right to it because there's another magnet in there. So this piece.
Okay, so mine doesn't look like yours. Like I'm still in pieces here.
Yeah, you should be. This is where we're going to. You should have these pieces here. We haven't done this yet. Don't worry.
Okay.
You're not behind. I'm just the type of person I like to show first where the
Yep,
end of the road
that's
is.
wonderful.
And then, yeah, going backwards kind of. So in this piece, there's a magnet under there, okay? And so that'll be the first step we'll be doing today is getting that piece put in here. So basically, the supplies we need for today is one set of magnets and one little square of your interfacing. If you did not get a chance to make your little strap, did anyone get a chance to make their little handle tab? Thumbs up if you made it. Okay, no worries. We'll give you a chance to make it. It takes like 5 minutes. All right, so there'll be sewing time when you'll get a chance to make it. We don't need it till the very last step. Okay, so you should have your quilted piece, and then you should have, which for me, I'm using this one today, but it's this cover piece, this little case.
And is that one interfaced? Is that what
And
this?
yes, it is.
So that's a large fusible interface. Okay.
Yeah. And so you have your interfacing on the back, and it's kind of centered on there. Okay. So we'll need those pieces, and then we will also need, this is how, so Marina, will be us making this front piece. Okay. And then
Okay.
to get this big long back piece, you will also have 2 pieces of fabric with interfacing put on them. Your 2 long skinny ones. I chose these 2 fabrics. And then you'll also have a same size piece of soft and stable. And so what I had to scratch my brain about when I read this pattern the first couple times is that in the pattern, Annie refers to this piece as the case stabilizer. To me, I wish she would have just called it your SF, your soft and stable. But she calls it the case stabilizer, and it keeps wreaking havoc on my brain when I read that. It's your piece is soft and stable. Okay.
Well, I realized I have a hard time remembering which piece is which, so it's important to keep those little squares on there.
Yeah, I agree. It is. Yeah. And in any case you're in doubt, go right back to that first page of cutting instructions and take your time and see like what size that piece is you're holding, and you can usually figure it out if your papers aren't on it.
Yeah.
So we're going to be using these 3 pieces today, and then our bias binding that we've pressed wrong sides together in half
So
length.
how big is your base? Because
This one?
yeah, like I do too many things at once, and I'm trying to figure out if I got
Yep.
the right piece.
So I'm making the large one today. So that means that this one is 9.5 tall by 6 inches wide. I'm just going to verify that quickly because my sewing machine is right beside me with the measuring. Yeah.
Well, that's how big mine is, so that's good.
Okay, good,
That's a
good.
good sign.
You have the right piece. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to be putting in today. So everybody's got their pieces. All
And
right.
that's the front.
That is, so this, I'm going to have this sitting now with my main front up. So let's just take a look at our pattern first and kind of catch up where we left off. So going by the assumption that we cut all of our pieces. And again, what can be helpful is to take a Frixion pen because you can iron them off. And you can take your colored pen and you can circle the size you're doing it this time. So I'm going to grab mine just to model that. So right now I'm working on the large one. I prefer everybody works on a large one, but if for some reason you're doing the small, that's okay too. The larger size is easier to make your first time on something. Goes for everything. Project bags, you name it, clam up bags. Making a larger size is easier to work with than smaller pieces until you get used to something. So I would have circled all of those in red to know which ones I'm using. Okay. So we quilted it, we cut it, we started preparing components. Everyone would have fused their interfacing to the pieces of fabric listed. And then I'll turn to page 4.
And it's how big again? That one?
That one in large.
This is a large one. Yeah.
That one is what I say, 5.5. I can't find the spot right now. You said you had the right size.
Yeah, but I've now moved it.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, so I have one little over 9 inches tall and 6 wide.
That's it.
Okay.
That's the one. Yeah. Okay. And so now we prepared our bias binding for homework. If you didn't have a chance to make the hanging loop, I'll remind you to do that while we're working on sewing steps, okay? I'll make sure you get time to do that. Essentially, you're taking your piece of fabric 2 inches by 6 inches. And then we've done this before. You're going to press and find the center of the long side. Then you're going to iron in your 2 edges into that middle, fold it in half and iron it again. And then you're just going to go and do a 1/8 seam allowance and stitch it all down. So it looks like this. I had forgotten to make mine. And when I noticed that, like last Thursday when I was preparing, I think I whipped this up in 5 minutes, honestly. It's very quick. You'll have time to do it today. Okay. So now we're getting ready to prepare our case front. So I like to look at the steps to see, do I have everything? Do I have my case front? Now, this is what I like about Annie, right? Because Marina, we forget to label things, whatever happens, we misplace it. If I'm there sitting, and I do this all the time, like case front, which one's that? And I don't know. So she says prepared in step 1B. I just take time and I go right back to the beginning and I find, here's number 1, cut and quilt. Here's step B. And it says case front is 9.5 by 6 inches for the large size one. And that's how Marina, I can work through confirming, do I have the right pieces when I need to do that?
Perfect.
Yeah, it's helpful that way. And then do you have your front border, which is this piece, which is, looks like it's about 5 inches by 3.5 from a quick measurement I just did. So we need that. Then it says we need a piece of bias binding. It's just a little piece because you're only binding this little edge. So I had one little piece there that I prepped. Here it is. So it's way longer than I need, but just make sure that you're going to have more than we'll need to cover the edge. Okay, so sorry. I'm looking at this edge. If I have enough to cover that front case, then I've got enough for a piece. Okay, that's easy to bind this one. It's just one little piece of binding to put on.
No,
Yes.
is that the piece in step B5?
Yeah, when you made all the bias binding?
Yes.
Yes, so you just want to cut off, you don't even have to cut it off. If it's all joined, you can bind it and then snip off the excess or measure and cut yourself a piece large enough that you'll be able to cover that 6 inches.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, she doesn't say, I went back and looked in case I'd missed something and I couldn't find her anywhere where she said like cut a piece of binding this length.
Mhm.
Couldn't find it anywhere.
So
Okay.
which piece are you looking at right now that you said, because that is 3.5 by 5.
That's
Where does it go?
front border piece. It's going to end up going across here. And I know it
Okay,
looks
it
strange
looks
right
too
now.
small for there, and
Nope.
it should.
It'll work.
Yep.
You'll understand why as we get further going. Yeah. And then you have your magnet,
Mhm.
right? And you have a piece of soft and stable, or excuse me, SF 101, a little piece of interfacing. So that's what we need for this step. Alrighty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by sharing Annie's video because again, I find it really helpful to see step by step what's going to happen. And then we'll all come back together and work through it. And she really explains it nicely, but then I'll go through and do it step by step with you as well. So I'm just going to pull up my video. I'm going to make sure I got my audio set up right because I know we had problems last time with that. Same as system. That's the answer. Yep, okay. There we go. And again, if you're not hearing any video, Once you start seeing Annie's lips moving, please just shout out and tell me. It's the only way I know how to make sure. Whoops, what did I just do? I lost it as quick as I had it. Stop it. Try it again. Sorry. Are you hearing the music?
Welcome back. By now you should have a good start on your cut it out case. You've cut out the project pieces, quilted and cut out the case front, and prepared the components. Now it's time for step 3A, attach magnet and border. The process for attaching the magnet is slightly different if the fabric is quilted versus if it is non-quilted, so we've included both methods in this pattern. In this video, you will learn the process for attaching the magnet to a quilted piece. Let's get started. For step 3A, you will need the case front, the front border, the bias binding for the top of the case front, the magnet covers, and one sew-in magnetic snap set. Before we go too far, let's talk about the magnets. ByAnnie's magnets are enclosed in a flexible vinyl sleeve that enables you to sew the magnet in place. You don't need to make any holes in your project or use any special tools. Each set of magnets includes one positive side marked with a plus in the corner of the vinyl sleeve and one negative side marked with a minus in the corner of the sleeve. Be sure that you install the magnets in sets so that you are matching a positive to a negative. ByAnnie's magnetic snaps have a wrong side, which is marked with a ByAnnie logo or a dot, and a right side, which is flat and has no markings. For maximum strength, the magnets must also be attached with the right or flat sides together. If you put the wrong sides together, they will stick, but not nearly as strongly. We'll begin by marking lines for placement of the magnet and border. Position the case front with the main fabric side up so that it is taller than it is wide. Mark 2 horizontal lines down from the top as directed in the pattern. Then follow the pattern instructions to mark vertical lines between the just marked horizontal lines. This creates a box in the center of the case. We'll attach a magnet within that box. Begin by separating the magnet set into 2 pieces. Our magnets are very strong, so strong that they can tear through the vinyl sleeve if you aren't careful. When separating them, we suggest that you slide the pieces apart rather than pulling them apart. We'll attach the positive side of the magnet to the case front. The negative side will be attached to the flap, so we can set it and one of the magnet covers aside for now. With the right or flat side of the magnet up, the dot or logo side will be down. Center the positive side of the magnet inside the just marked box. Use a small strip of double-sided basting tape or a swish of glue from a washable glue stick to help hold the magnet in place as you sew. Then stitch the magnet in place, sewing 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the vinyl sleeve. Since we're stitching on fabric stabilized with Soft and Stable, you shouldn't have any trouble with the magnet sticking to the stitch plate. Once you've stitched the magnet in place, we recommend stitching a small square of interfacing over the magnet to prolong wear. Place it with the fusible side down and stitch it in place, sewing about 1/4 inch from the edge of the interfacing. My 1/4 inch foot is narrow enough to do this easily. Depending on your machine, you may need to switch to a zipper foot in order to stitch closer to the magnet. This extra round of stitching helps secure the magnet and also holds the magnet in place should the vinyl sleeve become compromised. Our last step in preparing the case front is to attach the front border. This will hide the magnet and further prolong wear. With right sides together, align the long bottom edge of the front border below the bottom marked horizontal line. Sew across the long edge of the border that is closest to the top of the case front. Press the seam to set, being careful not to press directly on the magnet. Ironing can compromise the vinyl sleeve. Then press the border up, aligning its long raw edge with the top of the case front. Sew the layers together, stitching 1/8 of an inch from the top and side raw edges. The magnet and border are attached to the case front. Follow step 3B to shape and bind the case front. Then move on to step 4, prepare case back. You'll follow much the same process to attach the negative side of the magnet to that piece, but it's a bit simpler. Since that piece isn't quilted, you'll attach the magnet directly to the soft and stable. It never hurts to double check to make sure that you've positioned the magnet as directed. Then cover the soft and stable piece with the interfaced case back lining. There is no need for a border to cover the magnet. Once the case back is prepared, move on to step 4A and attach the case front to the case back. Then it will be time to shape the case. That's the subject of the next video, so meet me back here when you get to step 5B and we'll work together on that.
Okay. How do you feel watching that? Did it make sense? Give a thumbs up if the idea kind of jived.
I don't need
Okay.
to.
The piece of material still isn't big enough.
Nope, it's not. But when we go to shape the case, it'll be okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Because if you look here, see how wide it ends up? My piece is bigger. So when we're finished, because things are getting trimmed, it'll be enough. I don't know why she didn't make it to be the same width.
it's 5 by 3.5.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's start by making sure we have our magnets. All right. So as Annie said, they sliding apart is the proper way to get them apart. And the back side of the magnets are the ones that have her logo on them, BYA. So you can remember that. And we're going to be putting the back of the magnet against our main fabric. Okay. And we're starting with, I believe we're starting with the positive magnet. Let me just double check. And we're going to make sure we have that one positive side. So you can find the plus and the minuses in the quarter. It helps to put it on a plain background. So there's, sometimes you have to look at both of them to really be able to tell. There we go. That's my plus. So I'm going to keep my plus magnet out and I'm going to keep one of these and just set them here. Alrighty. So this is your main side. And because when it's finished, it is going to be right side up, if that helps you to understand. For me, this was my lining side. I'm making a scrappy one this time. So I hope that won't confuse anyone. A little note about using a print like I did. I thought, well, this would be fun to take. These are the pair of scissors I take with me on airplanes. And it would be fun to make it to match my airplanes. And then after, in fact, this is a leftover piece of a project of the Ultimate Travel Bag from ByAnnie. This was my lining of the bag and this was my exterior. So I just wanted to show you how fun you can reach into your scraps. The more and more you start making ByAnnie bags, you'll find ways to use up leftover pieces. So when I did this, I'm like, well, what's going to happen when I go to trim it? And so by doing that, you see how much we're losing of the outside after we trim it. So this might make more sense, Marina, when you see that border. I think visually, it probably would have been more helpful to people for the sake of a 1/2 inch or so of fabric on each side to have just made it the full width, but it's not necessary. Okay.
Well, even when I went to put my magnet, it says measure in 2.5, 1.5 from one side, 1.5 for the other side. Well, I'm sitting here looking at it going, I've got 3 inches left, and she's got this little tiny square that fits a magnet.
That's right.
You know, so right away, I'm sort of like, okay, I'm not doing it right then.
Nope. So let's go through together and mark them together. So because we are,
Michelle,
yes, go ahead.
sorry, after we quilted this front, we cut it down to 8.5 by 5.
Oh, that's my mistake. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So our front now is 8.5 by 5 for the large one. Right?
Oh, thank you. So I'll go cut that.
You know what? Thank you so much, Kathy. That is on page 3.
Yeah.
Part B, quilt and cut, step 3, and I missed doing that step.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. So I will quickly, if anyone else needs to cut theirs down to 8.5 by 5, now your piece will be the same. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Put your airplanes in the middle.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's true. I could cut it. If I cut it all from that side away, that'll focus more on my airplanes. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Kate. Marina and I need a moment to do that, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe anyone else, but that'll just take us a second. 8.5 by 5. So I just need to go trim off a bit. Howie Mandel could have a good time with all of my embarrassing bloopers.
It's just what makes it interesting.
Yeah, I don't like it when I make mistakes. When I'm teaching, that annoys me.
It's really a mistake.
We're learning that you're human.
Yes, no, it's true. We all are. 8.5 by 5. Okay.
Gee whiz.
Oh, now I don't feel so bad. Okay.
There we go. That's better. Look, there we go.
Yes.
Thanks to Kathy, Marina and I feel a lot better. Oh, and look. Oh, and now it's going to work. Kathy, I love you. This is awesome. Here I thought I was going to lose my airplanes. Now they're going to end up pretty much almost exactly where I want them. All righty. Oh, got to bring my ruler back. Let's get marking. All righty. So I'm using chalk to mark on this. However, most your lines will all get covered, but in case you're using a light fabric, you might possibly see marking pen through it. So just be aware of that. So I'm going to use chalk on mine because I am putting a light fabric over a dark. So I find with these, the best advice I have is go carefully and look at the picture, okay? Because as you get more and more into making more complicated ByAnnie bags, there are a lot of markings when you're making these bags. So take time to get familiar with how she does her pictures. And so just to kind of walk you through what I've noticed about it, I really like that. First of all, she'll put arrows to show you when she does that arrow 2.5 inches, it means your vertical line is 2.5 inches down from the top. This 1.25 inch means, sorry, that horizontal line is 1.25 inches down from the top. And that makes sense because we're placing our ruler, right, aligned with the top. So let's do our 2 horizontal lines. So assuming you're making, it's the same for the large or the small. It's only when you make your box that it varies. So we're going down 1.25 inch with our first line. Be careful of your ruler, especially if you're using these creative grid ones that have different ways to turn them. It's really easy to make a mistake. So doesn't matter, you can do your 2.5 inch line first, doesn't matter which line you draw first. So there's my 1.25, and again, I'm a ticker, so I immediately get you ticked off because I lose my space, my way in life easily, it seems, when it comes to following instructions. So I have my strategies I've developed. Okay, and then we'll do our second horizontal line 2.5 inches down from the top. Okay, So now you can see I have my 2 horizontal lines done. So I'm checking my 2.5 inch one is done. Now I want to go in 1.5 inches from each side. And so let's get you. Now I want this magnet to be straight. So just a little tip, I am using my tools on my ruler. I'm making sure that I have a horizontal line on my ruler that's straight with my raw edge. And I'm making sure I have a horizontal line that's straight with this edge. Okay. Because you're placing that magnet in there, it's nice to do a good job and have it squared up right. So there's the other one. And then there's my 1.5 on the other side. That doesn't look right. Okay, so right away I can tell that if I'm going to draw that line right now, that is a rectangle, not a square. So that's when my alarm bell should go off. And I know what my mistake is. Does anybody else know what I was just about to do wrong? I looked at the wrong number.
Supposed
And
to be
this is
178.
why I should have circled it in red like I usually do. I need to go 1 7/8 in for the large one. So you get to learn from my humanness. So let's do 1 7/8. But the nice thing is these are where the alarm bells should go off because I'm like, wait a second. I'm putting a square. I think of Fisher Price. I need a square to fit in a square. Another 1 7/8. 5, 6, 7. Okay, so now I have a square that is centered in between my 2 horizontal lines and it's equally in the middle. Okay, so this is where you're going to make sure that it's the side with the words on it that will go down and fit just inside that square. Okay, so if you have the ByAnnie basting tape, that's what I'm going to use. I just ripped off a little piece here and I'm going to put it on across the back. And then I'm just going to, whoops, pull that off. It got a little bit wonky on me, but it's actually, there's enough there sticky enough that that'll hold it. If you don't have the tape, if you have 505 glue or a bowhin glue stick or in a pinch, grab just a good old paper glue stick. Just try to keep it only under the magnet if you're going to use a glue that's not developed for sewing through. You don't want to gum up your machine. Okay. And I'm going to place that in. Okay, so that's first step. And make sure everybody's gotten to that step. And if you're quick and you already have this done and you're sitting there bored and you don't have your little hanging loop made, that's a little project you can come to when you're finished early.
Okay.
So then I'm going to sew this so you can see the steps again. And then I invite you to just keep working along at your own pace here to get this down. Bear with me. I'm trying a new tripod system today. And so far I like it. I'm just gonna,
So we don't sew
Yep.
that little piece of white interfacing in there right now.
not yet, correct.
Okay.
So first I'm gonna do a 1/8 stitch right through this plastic. So 1/8 seam allowance. So basically I'm just basting it in place. And then when it's basted in place, I'm gonna lay my little square on top. And then I'm going to attempt to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance or as close to that as I can get. Just something larger than the basting stitch that I put around. And that's just to give extra strength to keep your magnet in place and to reduce wear and tear. Okay, so I'm going to unclip this and move it to my sewing machine. See how this looks. Okay, yeah, you can see it. This might work out really well, this new setup. Alrighty. I do find my stiletto is handy when I'm working on these little pieces because you want to try to keep your fingers out of the way. As a person who has sewn through my finger with a long arm, I can tell you it is not nice when a needle goes all the way through your finger or any part way through your finger. Okay. So I've got my 1/4 inch foot on, so I'm just gonna lower my presser foot and here we go. And I'm gonna do this slowly. Not a race. And so my 1/4 inch foot is just kind of crawling over the edge of that magnet and it's working fine. But like Annie said, if you find that your machine is struggling, put on your zipper foot. Okay. Do it again. And I noticed that Annie did a knotting stitch at the end. Because I noticed her push the button on her Bernina there and do a knot. I don't do that. I just go back and sew a few stitches over where I started and then I cut my thread. And so now you can see that I have this essentially is basted into place inside my square. Everybody good with that part of understanding? Just, yep, okay. So then now I'm going to take that SF101 and I'm going to take the bumpy side, which is the fusible, and I'm going to put the bumpy side over my magnet, but I'm not going to iron it in place. So again, if it's slippy slidey on you, Annie doesn't say it in the video, but I'm just going to put a wee bit of tape there because that little piece does try to slide around on you when you start sewing. So that's easy for me to solve with just a little tiny bit of double-sided tape on my magnet, and I don't find it affects the strength of the magnet. I did it on the other two I made and it was fine. There we go. Okay. And this time though, I am going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance on this, or as close to that as I can get. And I do the same thing again. I just, instead of knotting, I just go and drive over the first 3 or 4 stitches where I began, and that locks in my stitches, and then I cut my thread. There we go.
Okay, that works. Okay.
Let me know when yours is done and that you succeeded.
Okay.
And don't hold your scissors too close to the magnet.
Yep, it works.
Mm.
So then, to complete this part, we're now on page 6. And the next step would be number 4. Attach the front border to cover the magnet. So you take your border piece, and it's really cool because this border piece is the same size. Did you notice that?
Mhm.
They're the same width. So I'm going to take that border piece and turn it so that I have my right sides together. I'm going to put it just up to the edge of that line I drew. That's the 2.5-inch line down from the top. Okay. So you notice she actually doesn't say put it on the line. She says put it just below the line. So I position it that I can still see my little chalk line there. Okay. Oh, here comes Pam. We'll let Pam in. And then you would take this to your sewing machine and sew a 1/4-inch seam allowance from this raw edge. So you're welcome to go ahead and do that step.
And
And
that's almost this length of the where the interfacing is, isn't it?
exactly, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. If you cut it exactly
Yeah.
the right size, mine's not the right size. I mean, you can see that, you can tell that's a way different seam allowance on here because I use up a lot of scraps. So I keep every scrap of everything. That's just how I was raised. Find a use for it. And as to tip, get large Ziploc bags, the kind that have the little white label part on them that you can easily write on. Start a scrap bag for like your SF 101, for your soft and stable. I use it all up. You can put it like a puzzle and iron different size pieces together to fill your space. So that's why mine's not exact. I pulled a scrap, I'm like, oh, look that, I have a scrap that's pretty much the right size, and I just slapped it on. All right, so I'll sew my 1/4-inch seam allowance and we'll let everyone else do the same. Now, I'm going to move my camera back to my machine to show you what's happening to me right now. I don't know if you can see that well. I'm going to have to try this. Okay. I have my 1/4-inch foot on. And the funny thing was when I was sewing on my magnet, no problem, it all stayed in place. I am now noticing that my border piece is stretching on me. It's pulling the fabric a bit as I'm feeding, and already, do you see that in the bottom left corner? My border piece is becoming longer than the piece I'm sewing it to. When that happens and you're sewing, and I have dual feed on my machine right now, that is usually an indicator that your machine wants the walking foot put on. That thickness right now is pushing the limits of my regular presser foot. I could try releasing the top pressure on my foot, and that might help a little bit. But that's why this happens, in case this has ever happened to you. I'm going to carry on with it the way it is because it's fine. I'm trimming off that little bit of excess, won't matter. But normally I would stop and now just rip the seam out and put on my walking foot if this was a big project. And then when I have that sewed in, you'll go to your iron. I don't know what I did, but mine is too long everywhere. But you know what? It's better to have too much fabric than not enough.
Yeah.
And as Annie points out, if you're going to press this, be careful not to press where the magnet is. I don't find you need to. Just do a little finger press. And then the last step that I will have to do to complete this part is we want to secure this border so it doesn't, bend back on us and do that while we're sewing. So we're going to just then go to our machine and do a 1/8 seam allowance all the way around. Start over at your left side, go up, come all the way down around, just to hold that in place while we're measuring and doing our next steps. Wow, now we have fog here. I just heard a foghorn on one of the ships. Can't see a thing out there.
Thunderstorm this morning down here.
We had one too, Etta. Yeah, we're only about 45 minutes apart or so.
Yep.
I'm starting to feel like I live in Calgary, where the weather changes every 5 minutes. And that's one of the reasons I won't ever live in Calgary, because when I've been out there, that drives me nuts.
You must be used to that from Newfoundland.
Well, yeah, when I'm down in Newfoundland, for sure. That is also the situation there. Or you just drive. It's not that the weather changes in 5 minutes, it changes 5 kilometers away.
Yeah.
You'll be in fog, and all of a sudden you'll go around a corner somewhere, and then it's like sunshine splitting the ground and no fog anywhere in sight. People down there will text their friends like 20 minutes away to say, what's weather doing there now? Do I need to bring an umbrella? Do I whatever? Like if they're driving to St. John's and they live 20 minutes away, they'll text their friends in St. John's, find out what the weather is. I'm going to trim this and just trim it to the right size and do my 1/8 stitch here.
Okay, I did. No, that's right. Oh, that's right.
Because of-
1 3/8.
That's a long, loud one. Did you guys hear that?
Nope.
No, you can't? Okay, I thought you might. That was a loud foghorn. I am also going to take the time to put my walking foot on right now.
Three eighths. Makes sense.
How are we all doing?
Good.
Good? Excellent. Is there anyone who would still like more time for this part?
I do.
Okay.
Just putting my walking foot on like you.
Okay. Yep. No rush. You let us know when you're
Mhm.
ready.
Okay.
Good time. Anyone needs a bathroom or a quick snack break?
What is 12?
Mhm.
No.
Now that changed the top color, it makes a lot more sense. You know,
Mm-hmm.
this with the
Yeah. See, now you can start to see the connection, right, of the pieces
yeah.
coming together. Yeah.
You didn't set the toaster.
No, I didn't.
What setting you?
5.
So did you call that your case front?
Correct.
Okay.
So this will be. Lighting angle trim top using 2.5 piece of bias lighting. Okay. 2.
And then once we are at this step, then we will be ready to go on to part B to shape and bind this piece. And then it'll start to look even more like the finished version.
No,
Geez.
cheese and orange in the fridge next to my margarine.
So 1 3/8 is a little less than 1 1/4, right?
No,
You're
it's 1
doing the
1/4.
large one. You're doing 1 7/8.
So under B, it says 1 3/8 over in figure 13.
Yep.
That's not the one I'm doing?
Yeah, it is.
Well, it says
Sorry. Oh, you've jumped ahead.
It's a bias binding.
If
You're
you're
talking.
looking at figure 13, you've jumped ahead. I haven't gotten there yet.
No, it's just you said that's what we're doing next. So I was just
Yes.
reading it over before
Sorry,
you got
yes.
there.
Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and go there. So by the time you finished the end of figure 12 and you pressed it up, your front piece looks like this. You have a top border and a bottom section. Alrighty.
Yep.
So now we have to cut it to this angle and bind it. So we take our ruler and we are going to mark a point 1 3/8 inches down from the top on the right side, because what we're doing is we're creating to know where we need to go from side to side. So we go 1 3/8. So on your ruler, this is where having a ruler that has all the little 1/8 in it is very helpful, because they can just count for 3 little lines. And I just keep this really close to the seam allowance when I do it. So that is actually buried inside my little stitching that I did to baste it down. Can you see where I did my red line?
So is 1 3/8, is that less than a quarter, 1 1/4?
That is more than a
Oh,
quarter.
more
So
than-
4/8 equals half an inch,
Oh, right.
right? Yep.
Okay. Oh, shoot.
Okay. So you mark that down 1 3/8 from the top, and you just put a little mark to hold your place there. So you know where 1 3/8 is.
That won't matter because now I'm just drawing a line further down.
Okay. And then you're going to take that and line up to your top left corner. So my top left corner is there at the edge of my ruler, and I've stopped my ruler at where I drew my line. So this distance right here, I'm going to color it with my Frixion pen. Okay, that is 1 3/8 down from the top right-hand corner.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to draw a line, just so that you can see what it looks like. You don't necessarily have to draw the line. You can go on your cutting mat and take your rotary cutter and just cut it off. But I'm going to draw the line so that you can see how mine now looks like the picture figure 13. If you have any hesitation and you're not sure, you're welcome to mark it and hold yours up and show it to me before you cut. But basically, you're cutting off a long, skinny triangle. So I'm going to cut mine with scissors, and I don't have to go over to my cutting table, seeing I have it marked. But a rotary cutter definitely is a more accurate way to cut, using a rotary cutter in your ruler. So cut that part off. Okay, and then I'm going to stitch this edge closed. So actually, yes, I should have marked it and stitched before I cut it. That would have made it easier for me. So if you didn't cut yours yet, draw your line and stitch below it first before you cut. My apologies. Still works this way though. I'm going to just stitch that closed.
Are you stitching that just 1/8 of an inch?
Correct, yes. Yeah, so I just went and stitched a 1/8 inch along there. It's just to hold that flap in place while we're binding it, squishes it down a little bit for us. Oh, I finally found the piece for the measurements for the bias binding strip. It is in there. Of course it should be in there. So then, now that I have this stitched down, now this is when I want to put my binding to close it. So I am making the large one. So if I'm looking at section B, step 4, it says to use your 2" by 6" piece of bias binding. Now, Annie has you use the bias binding for this step. And I suspect it's because when you make the bias binding, you have more than you need. So you might as well use it up. However, say for whatever reason you wanted to get fancy and have some fun.
Yeah, it goes.
I got it.
I'm just going to ask whoever is having conversation if they're able to mute. Thank you so much. If you wanted to get funky because you wanted this to be a different binding, you do not have to use bias binding on this piece. There are no curves. So say you wanted to reach into your scrap bin. Mine's sitting there nice and handy. And for whatever reason, I want to use a nice scrap of this Tula Pink to do my binding. It wouldn't matter if it's cut on the bias or not. This one happens to be, because this is a straight edge. So I'm just throwing that in there just for a little bit of learning about when we need to use bias binding and when we don't need to. So you're going to take your 2" strip, alrighty, and I am going to attach it from the top because I am going to, I'm going to machine stitch it closed, but I am going to attach it from the top. And when I do this, I'll be sewing my 1/4" seam allowance. So I'm going to show you that, and then I'm going to sew it so that I can show you what I do when I wrap it over for when I go to sew it, the rest of it on by machine. Okay, so I sewed that with a 1/4" seam allowance, and I do recommend pressing it with your iron. It gets it to lay nice and flat. I'm not going to do that right now just to make it speedier. I'm going to grab my Wonder Clips. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, because I'm going to go back and I'm going to end up stitching this from the back, I want to make sure that I'm covering this seam allowance. So there's 2 ways you can do this. I'm going to start again. I stitched it to the front. I'm going to curl it over the back. If I'm confident that my back is going to cover that seam allowance that I just stitched, if I'm confident, and I'm pretty confident right now because I'm not even tugging or pulling, and I can see that I am going past that 1/4" I just sewed, which means it's covered. It's going to be hidden. If I'm confident of that, then I'm actually going to stitch this down from the front and go right in the ditch. And because I'm confident that I'm extending past the 1/4" seam allowance on the back, I'm going to catch all of my binding and sew it down. And this is where pressing it with your iron can be helpful so that you're really smoothing that fabric back all the way so that you have as much to go on the back as you should. And then I'm going to clip it with a couple of Wonder clips. I'm going to clip it in place. And again, I'm going to check on the back now that I've clipped it in place, and it's awesome. All of my seam allowance is covered. Okay. Now, when you go to sew this, there's a few things you can do depending on what presser feet you have for your machine. If you have what's called an edge stitch or a stitch in the ditch foot, that is the one to use. That will give you the most success. So the way you use this foot when you're sewing, this flange goes right on the ditch, okay? And I use that to follow along. That flange drives along. It's just like it's going in a track, okay? And in this case, I leave my needle right in the middle. So what it means is I'm sewing right in that track or in that ditch. And because I'm far enough past it on the back, it will catch all of my binding. It's nothing worse than doing it. You turn over the back. Oh, there's a little ½ inch that didn't get stitched down. Oops, there's a little bit that didn't get stitched down. That drives me nuts. Okay. Oh, Sue Fowler's joining us too. And I meant to say hi, Pam, earlier. I was waiting for your to be fully connected. Okay. So use a stitch in the ditch foot if you can. If you don't have a stitch in the ditch foot, you probably have a hemming foot. They usually are standard foot with a machine, and they have a little flange in it, and you can adjust your needle to follow that flange. Any questions about that part? Okay, so then we'll just refresh. So once you have done your trimming, take your binding, stitch a ½ inch to the front, press it with your iron, purl it to the back. Make sure you're going past your ½ inch seam allowance you already stitched, and then clip it or pin it in place. Clipping is the easiest way. And then you're going to go to your sewing machine and stitch in that ditch. If you're not confident that you're covering all this from the back, you have two options. You could hand stitch this, whip stitch it down, or you could stitch from this side. You could stitch along on this side. Just be aware that it is.
Could you just show it one more time, Flip? I can't figure out how stitching in the ditch right there is going to hold down where you have the pink thing clipped.
Okay, so it's because, Marina, you might be able to tell just by looking right here.
Okay.
Let me hold this in place.
It's because this is the side you put it on first and flipped it over to the back.
Do you see how the back is wider than the front?
Yes.
So if I'm sewing here, I'm sewing through the back too.
So you put it on the front first. Okay. Yeah. Got it.
Okay. So then when you're sewing along, following this edge with your foot, you know that you have more fabric on the back than you can see, Marina.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
So, yep. So you're definitely catching it. It'll stay in place. Okay. Now, the more fabric I have on the back, it does mean that I might get a tiny little like edge that's not sewn down. So I'll sew mine and you can see what I mean. Okay. And I don't have my edge stitch on because I don't want to waste time on you guys by changing it. So I'm going to eyeball it. There we go. Bang on. Okay. So can you see? I'm going, right? So I'm right there in that ditch where my needle is lined up. And the stiletto can help you with this so that you can hold that down nicely in place.
Sometimes when your thread just won't listen to you, you just have to rethread your machine.
Yes, you do. And I don't need to backstitch or anything. Cut my threads. So now if you look, my front is tidy. Oh, I didn't catch the back. So here's a lesson to be learned. When I removed my Wonder clips,
Yeah.
it budged on me and I should have checked that because I usually try to remember to do that. That's okay. I'm going to just stitch it again. Now, you know what? I'm going to be even slicker and I'm going to use some of this tape. Why not? I've never tried this before, but I've got it, so why not try it?
My tape ran away from home this week.
Uh-oh. Yeah, I've never tried this, but why not? That'll help hold it in place.
Went out and bought it specifically, too.
Uh-oh. Yeah, that'll help. There we go, victory. It's all staying down nicely. And you can see that my stitch really is near the edge of my binding. And yeah, it takes practice and taking time to get it all in place. That tape definitely helped. I'm going to remember that for future. But it's a small piece. It's no big deal to
So
put
is this piece of bias tape isn't going anywhere else, just across?
It's also going to go all the way around your bag.
No, but I mean, I can cut it.
Yes, you can. So now you can trim it even with your ends.
Now, okay, I figured out what my problem was. When I flipped it over to the other side, I always thought you had to sew it at the back. And
Yeah.
so now I got what you mean.
Yeah, if you sew it from the front,
Yes.
it's a much cleaner look, but you have to take that time to make sure your back is far enough so that it's succeeding, so that it's past the 1/4 inch seam allowance stitch line. That's the trick, and that's not easy. Because it also assumes that we sew an accurate and consistent 1/4 inch seam. And it is one of the reasons that Annie had us cut our strips narrower than like regular binding too. When you do a 2.5 inch strip binding on a quilt, unless you do what's called stuffing the binding, which I'm not going to get into, but it means leaving your quilt a little trimmed bigger. When you roll it to the back, you have way too much binding fabric. And then if you stitch it from the front, you have this whole like chunk of fabric that's like almost Kate's like a lip on the back of your quilt because you don't get a stitch close enough to the edge of the binding on the back. So we're exactly halfway through class and we're doing well. We're right on track. We might have finished bags today. So when everybody has done this section, we're actually going to then move on to attaching our magnet to our stabilizer piece. So those of you who, once you're ready, when you have this piece done, you'll just sit it aside and you'll go and grab your big long piece of soft and stable and the other side of your magnet and your other little piece of SF-101. And this part will be a breeze because we've already done it once.
Okay.
Is it 12 and a half by 4, that piece?
16 and a half by 5. If you look
Over on
on
the big one.
page 7, if you look on page 7, at the top of page 7 in that gray box, it shows what you need, your 2 pieces of fused, a main fabric and a lining fabric. And then you need your pieces soft and stable for the large at 16 by 5. And your fabric is also 16 by 5, your interfaced fabric.
And you're putting the magnet on the interfacing of the top piece.
Soft and stable.
We're going to be putting the soft and stable. Does everyone want to, we all ready to go on to this or am I rushing?
No. Already there.
Already there. Okay, let's go ahead. I don't mind repeating things for others who work at a different pace. It's all good. Okay, so we've got this. This is my whole 16. You can see it's a big long piece, 16 by 5. And so I'm putting it the long end up. All right. I'm going back to get my ruler. I'm going to use my Frixion pen for this so you can see it well. Whatever you're using, chalk is fine. Again, with any type of markings, you just want to make sure that whatever you use for marking won't show through your fabric when you're done. Okay, so we're going to look at figure 15 on page 7. And again, we're marking those placement lines and making a little box. So our first horizontal line we're going to draw, it says, is 1 1/4 inches down from the top. So I'm lining up 1 1/4 inch from the top on my ruler, and I'm drawing my first horizontal line. Okay, and so that one's done. And then it says I need to go down 2 1/2 inches from the top with my Lex line. So now I've got 2. Let's just double check. I went too much. Did I do too much on my first line? No, that one's right. That one's 1 1/4. Okay, just seemed off to me. There's 1 1/4, and then there is my 2 1/2 is right there. Okay, so now I'll do that line. It's a little harder drawing the line on the soft and stable. Okay, so I have my 2 horizontal lines, so I'm ticking them off on my pattern. And now I have to go in, this is where you look, we're making the big one. So we go 1 7/8 in from the edge. 1 and 7/8. So there's my 1 inch, and then I go over with my little lines 7. And again, I want to set a nice square box for this, so I'm lining up with a horizontal line on my ruler and a vertical line down the side on my 7/8 line. Okay, and there's that one. Do the same thing over here. 2 inches, come back one. Okay. And so now I have made a box for my magnet. So I'm going to do the exact same thing I did before. I'm going to make sure that the side with the letters on it will go down. And so the flat side is looking up at me. I want to secure it with something, whether I put a little bit of glue on there or a piece of ByAnnie tape. I want to secure it before I go to sew it. Okay. And then I'm going to go to my sewing machine and repeat the steps like I did before. I'm going to do a 1/8 seam allowance, and I'm going to sew. My stiletto just stuck to it. I'm going to go 1/8 seam allowance all the way around on the plastic. Okay. And then when that's sewed, I'm going to take the rough side, the bumpy side of my SF-101 and place it on top. And again, if you want to put a little dab of glue or something to hold it, but don't put much because we don't want to mess up our magnet, just a tiny little bit. And I'm going to go 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. Everybody okay with that? All right. Shout out if you have a question and I'll do mine.
Michelle, I have one quick question.
Yes.
Can you just use scrap fabric instead of the interfacing?
You know, you probably could. Yeah. I mean, the magnet is so strong that I don't think a piece of scrap fabric would be too thick,
Okay.
but you could, you know,
Yeah.
because this is a little bit thinner than fabric, but I think it would still work.
Yeah. Okay.
Use up your little crumbs pieces.
Well, I only cut 2 of the 1 1/4 inch squares.
Okay.
And I don't know where my spare is to do the second
Yeah.
case. So
Take a little piece of fabric and I think it'll be fine.
Yeah.
I mean, with it being so hard to pull those magnets apart, I'm sure that won't make that big an impact.
I just thought about that since we had to cut the other one before we started. Did we have to cut this one?
Yes, you should add 2 of those little pieces.
No, I'm talking about. Oh no, it's not quilted, so it's okay.
That's right. This one is in quilted, which seems really
Okay.
strange, right? Because we don't expect it to be unquilted. But the reason it is because this was the easiest way she figured out to hide the magnet. When Annie released this pattern a year ago in Chicago at H&H Americas, I was there when she did her talk and she explains it on her videos too. She's done it. She had to find a way to hide this in here that we could get to it to do it. So with this piece, she did it by adding a border, but by this piece, we do it by adding our fabric after. Okay, so now I put that little square on there, that 1 1/4 inch square, my SF-101, and I'm going to stitch that one down now. I'm going to put a tiny little bit of tape on that. I've also wondered, would it matter if your square of fabric was a little bigger? Probably not, but you have to make sure that you would catch the plastic that's around the magnet when you're sewing. That's probably why she makes it the exact same size. Okay, so now we've got our magnet installed. And I'm just going to show you the next part of this. And then again, just work at your own pace and don't be shy to ask me to show it again. Once you have that magnet sewn in, so you can see I have my lines on one side, my other side, I can see where I sewed it. Now I'm going to attach my fabric to it. So what you want to remember about this is we are looking at the side. This is going to be your lining. All right, because this whole piece is the piece we're making right now. So the magnet is actually hiding right there underneath my lining. So whatever fabric you have chosen to be your lining, that's the fabric that's going to get put on this side where your magnet is.
So your lining isn't your light gray there with the scissors on it?
Correct. This is the lining, the light
That
gray.
is the lining.
Yes.
Okay.
So that would have been the fabric that I put on this side,
Okay.
facing
Got
up. Yeah. And then when I'd flip to this side, that's my main fabric I'm going to attach on that side.
So we attach them separately?
We do. And this is the weird part. At least I think it is. When I did it, I'm like, is she sure about that? I'm just like, am I sure about that? That seems strange, but it works. Okay. Because the thing is, soft and stable doesn't have to be quilted. The way it's designed, the fabric clings to it. So especially a small project like this, it's okay not to quilt it. But I want to tell you that I did an experiment. When I made this one, I made the large one first, and I did exactly the way she told me to do it. And then I made the smaller one and did it the Michelle way, which I always like to try because I look for ways to cut corners. I don't have the small one here right now. It's at the store on display. But when I did the small one, I was like, sewing it twice. Why do I need to spend my time doing that? And so I basted it together with both the fabrics and pinned them in place and sewed. And then, yeah, one of them got all wrinkled and puckered. And then I said, okay, listen to Annie.
So my question is, if I'm just laying it out in front of me, the one that's facing the table is going to end up flipped over to the top.
Correct. See when
So
it closes?
do you want it the same color? You have it the same color as the bottom side then?
This is the
Yeah, your
same
main-
fabric, yes, because those are the main fabrics, the main fabric.
Well, we're doing the lining first.
So we're putting the lining piece on first.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just hadn't decided which one was going to be my lining.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's you can play, yeah, but you can play around. So
Yeah.
you see, for me, I wanted to use up some stuff. I'm using the same for the lining and the outside.
Okay, that's confusing.
So I'm just sewing all the way around now.
Yeah.
at an 8.
So
At
sorry, I
8.
did not mean to confuse anyone. I apologize if that did. I could do this to make it easier. Just a second. I'm going to label them. Okay. So one is my lining. And for me, the other one is my main. So you just make sure you have your pieces so that you know which one is your lining and which one is your main. And we're going to start with the lining.
Okay.
Okay. So I've got my piece that is my lining fabric. I've got my magnet with the sewn side up. And I'm going to place my lining. That lining is fusible interfacing on the back.
Yep.
And I'm going to place that right on top. And I like to clip it with my Wonder Clips. And then when I take that to my sewing machine, I'm going to do a 1/8 seam allowance to just base this in place, to hold it in place and join it onto my soft and stable. And yeah, we're only sewing through one layer at a, we're only adding one layer of fabric at a time. Annie's way is the best way. Okay, so now I'll take it to my machine.
Okay. Well, small ones.
So now you'll see that I've got that lining piece attached. Okay. So now I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to take what my main fabric is, whatever you've chosen for your main, which means the outside piece. Okay. But when the case is closed, it's the fabric you're seeing up here. And it's the fabric you're seeing on that back. And then I'm going to clip that one in place, and then I'm gonna go back and do the same thing again and sew a 1/8 seam all out and all the way around it.
Okay. Okay. This is a large one. Oh.
Now we'll need our once everyone's gotten to this point, we'll actually be starting to sew the whole case together and cut it into its shape. So we will need your hanging loop for that part when we get there.
Oh. Okay.
Something I do love about this Cut It Out bag and our Project 2.0 bag is they really are great for using up small bits of fabric because you can get scrappy with the pieces. Because the pieces are like small, it's easy to use up different. I find if you have things that are less than a fat quarter, you can find uses for them in these two projects.
I like the bag because it makes a nice gift.
Oh, it does. It really does. I mean, everybody's got scissors in their house. For the cut it out bag and the project bag, yeah, you can put anything in it.
When
Be
I went
great.
into the Cornwall Quilt Show on the weekend, they gave out one of those little corner things that goes on your book.
I saw that at the show. Yeah,
My granddaughter just loved it.
that was one of the little things we had in our advent box last year was to make those. The only thing different is I noticed it felt like they didn't put any stabilizer inside theirs. They were soft, really soft. I like them with a little bit of stabilizer in them because they stay on your page easier. But they're very cute. Those little scissors cases would be great for the kids at school. They're always when I was a teacher, they're always misplacing their scissors or they'd be real, in their desk and I always worried they're going to reach in and cut themselves for the kids who didn't take time to put it inside their pencil case or something.
This is where you know whether you put your magnet in right, eh?
Yep.
Uh-oh.
But if you have
Should've said
to,
that. Might be changing which is the front and which is the back.
yeah, that's what I was just going to say. It was a creative design choice.
Very good.
Oh my God, that's funny.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I made my first tamarack jacket, and I think Marina, you were in the class
Yeah.
with your guild, yeah, I cut 2 left arms.
Oh,
So,
that happens.
well, it wasn't that I guess I essentially cut 2 left arms because I was new to garment making and I didn't remember the fact that I had to then flip the pattern over and cut the mirror image for the other arm.
Yeah.
So I cut them identical. And when I got to put the second arm on, I'm like, well, why doesn't it line up right?
Oh, for F's
So
sake.
then I went to the teacher. I'm like, do I need to make a whole arm again? And she goes, oh my God, no, we're going to figure this out. We trimmed and I got a little creative with some of my seam allowances and you can't tell. Fits fine now. That's my jacket that I made out of the Tula pink fabric with all the hexagons.
Oh,
It's a hot mess of
I
air.
started to make mine too large. So when I got the shoulders sewn together, I realized this
Yep.
and cut it down 2 sizes. And I don't think I like it as much as I thought I would because the thickness, I would like a little bit thinner, like
Yeah.
not such a heavier coat.
Yeah, so my second one I made with polyester batting, and that's all I use now. I'm actually making the Canton Moto jacket. I'm going back to my homework after class here because I have 16 pieces to have quilted and cut out. And it's a fitted jacket. So we actually have to do what's called grading, and like I couldn't just use one size. So I was stressing about that earlier in the week, and I can't believe it, but I'll divulge the secret. I actually went to Amazon and ordered a ruler for dressmaking to help you get the curve and grade your size.
Oh, the French curve.
Like the French curve, yeah, because I couldn't get one fast enough for any of my distributors. Only one of them had them in stock, and there's Vancouver. I'm like, I won't get it because my class is next Saturday. And I have to get my homework done this weekend.
see, when I did my pattern, I did it in pre-shrunk white flannel.
Yep. And did you like that?
Yes, it does not give me much bulk. I'm
Yeah.
actually doing one for my granddaughter that has a pieced box in the back.
Nice.
And because I want it so that it goes under, not a jacket they depend on to, keep her.
That's right. It's for,
That,
yeah, inside for fashion.
yeah, so that's what it's going to be.
Nice. Yeah,
Hey, that's a good idea.
so
Yeah, because I've already been told by the girls at the store I have to bring it in because I bought the fabric there.
okay, yeah, we want to see it. Well, so Etta, I made the vest that I have it was supposed to be a tamarack jacket. And then by the time I got the shoulders and everything assembled, I'm like, I like this as a vest, so I never added on the arms. They're still sitting quilted in a drawer.
Okay.
But I used flannel as my batting for that. I took old scraps of flannel left over from baby quilts that I'd made, and I
Okay.
just made sure that it wouldn't show through my outer fabric. And as long as it was not showing through, you should see the crazy stuff that's pieced into that vest.
Yeah.
Now-
No, I did that because when I originally wanted the jacket, it was supposed to be like for office work and things.
Right. Yeah.
So you can't have something that's, really
Bulky.
bulky.
Yeah.
Otherwise you die.
Yeah.
Now you could use the sleeves. I cut some extra extra material, quilted material I had up and made a bag.
Yep.
Oh yeah, I could do that with the sleeves for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll turn into something at some point. They're in the orphan box. Alrighty, how are we doing? Are we all to this part?
Let's see.
So I'm going to show you the next step, and then we're going to watch Annie's video on how she shapes the case. Okay. So right now I've got my main fabric up. I'm actually going to turn that over. So lining side up. This is called your case back. Make sure your magnet is up there at the top and not down here at the bottom. Okay. So magnet is right here. In fact, I'll just stick my scissors to it and that'll make it really clear where the magnet is. Alrighty. I'm going to take this piece. This is my case front. I'm going to line it up right to the bottom. I'm going to clip it all in place. And I'm going to double check, but I think I'm doing it with a 1/8 seam allowance. Yes, I am. Okay, so I'm going to clip this in place. And taking the time to make sure I'm well lined up here. I like lots of clips. I don't want this shifting on me when I'm sewing, especially when I want to make sure I get those airplanes. I want to make it stay right in the spot it should be. So I'm taking the time to really secure it here. Even going to flip it over to the back and make sure I can see that my raw edges are lined nicely, and they are. Nothing's sticking out past where it should be. Okay. And then I'm going to take this to my sewing machine, and I'm just going to start here on the right side. I'm going to start right behind my binding. Okay, like a 1/4 inch behind, 3 or 4 stitches. And start sewing right in there, and then stitch up over top of that binding and come all the way around until I get back up to the top left. And
And
again,
it was an 1/8? Sorry.
Yep, I'm going to go a couple more stitches past my binding just to make sure I've really secured that binding down. And then I'm going to cut my thread. So I'll go a few stitches back. So again, I'll start 1/8 seam allowance. We're just basting this in place. So I'll start just before my binding on the right, stitch over top of my binding, down across the bottom, back up the left side, and stitch past my binding a few more stitches, and then stop and cut my thread. Alrighty. So I will do mine, but again, most important thing is make sure that magnet's at the top. If you want to double check, like Annie said in her video, test it right now. Okay, mine are sticking together, so I know I'm all good. It's your chance to make sure you haven't accidentally put, the wrong side of your piece upward. It should be your lining piece upward and the outside main part of your front bag upward. All good? Okay, I will stitch mine in place.
Okay. So this is okay. That's why.
Is there anyone who's done up to this part now? You can give me a thumbs up if you are, or wave. Okay, yay. Good job, guys. Alrighty. So we are now going to move on to shaping the case on page 8, part B, but we're going to watch Annie's video as I like seeing how she explains them. And she's just cute. She's nice to watch. So we'll pull that up. And remember, you do have access to these videos because you have a coupon code on your pattern so that you don't have to pay the $5 to get US to get access to them. All right, so let's share my screen. Oops, I just noticed a comment. Oh, Sue joined in late. Happy Easter, Sue. I think did Sue stay on? She there? No, I think she realized she was late and carried on. Okay, she's gonna watch the recording. Okay. Alrighty.
Welcome back. Our cut it out case is really coming together. We've prepared the front and back and joined them. Up to this point, most all the steps were done with rectangular pieces. This makes it easy to measure and mark lines. But we want a case that will conform to our scissors, so our next step is to shape the case. Shaping is a technique used in many ByAnnie patterns, so let's work together to learn the process. For this step, you will need the case prepared in the previous step and a 2.5-inch circular object, such as a 2.5-inch Creative Grid circle ruler or template A, which is in the pattern. We'll begin by positioning the case so that it is taller than it is wide, and the case front is on top at the bottom. Now we're ready to mark some fold and shaping points and lines. First, we'll mark a fold line. On the lining side of the case back, mark a horizontal line from side to side, down from the top as directed in the pattern. Then turn the piece over and mark the same line on the main fabric side. Return the case to the lining side, and on the top edge, mark 1/2-inch long lines from the top down in from each side as directed in the pattern. Follow that same process to mark 1/2-inch long lines from the bottom up on the bottom edge of the case as directed. Now we'll use those shaping points to mark some shaping lines. On each side, mark a diagonal line from the marked fold line up, connecting the fold line to the lines marked in from each side on the top edge. Then mark a diagonal line on each side from the marked fold line down, connecting the fold line to the lines marked in from each side on the bottom edge. It would be difficult to bind those angled corners, so next we're going to round the top and bottom corners of the case. We'll use a 2.5-inch circular object to make gently rounded corners. We'll start by positioning the circular object in the upper left corner of the case. Align its edges with the top and just marked angled line on the left. Then mark around the outer left edge of the object to round that corner. Move the circular object over so that it's aligned with the top and angled line on the right, and mark around the outer edge to round that corner. Follow that same process to position the ruler in each remaining corner and trace around the outer edge to round the corners. Before we cut to shape and round the case, we're going to do some sewing to join all the layers. That will make cutting much easier as we won't have any loose edges flapping around. Stitch all around the case, sewing 1/8 of an inch inside all the just marked lines to seal the edges. Then cut on the marked lines to round the corners and shape the case. I usually do this with a combination of my rotary cutter and my sharp micro serrated edge scissors. Wow, what a difference shaping makes. With a few marks, stitches, and cuts, we quickly went from a rectangular piece to a nicely scissor-shaped piece. All that's left to do is attach the hanging loop and bind the raw edges, and our case will be finished. That's the subject of the next video. See you there.
Okay, so let's work through this step by step together. Alrighty, I'm just going to remove this now so that I can cut safely. Okay, so we have lining side up, magnets at the top. This is all sewed together. So you're going to take your marking tool, and just to note that you're going to see the line we draw across here. So you want to be able to remove it. So very important for this, you're using something you can remove from your fabric for your marking. Okay. So we're looking at page 8, part B, shape the case. And so when we look at the first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw the fold line. So essentially, we're drawing this right here. This is where it will fold. And you're going to notice that we do not sew this line. We do not stitch on it. If you look at Annie's pattern, when she shows you over here where we've stitched, stitches are dotted lines. And we did not stitch that fold line. So I just want to point that out. You don't need to stitch that. It closes nicely. If you were to stitch it, I think you'd really take away from the nice look of the bag on the outside. Okay. So here we go. We've got our ruler, and the very first line that we need to mark, I'm looking at figure 17, is we are going to do a line 5.5 inches down from the top. So it really helps if you have a wider ruler. I'm getting rid of this 3.5 inch wide ruler and I'm grabbing my wider one. Okay, so I'm going to position my ruler 5.5 inches from the top. I'm going to use the horizontal and vertical lines of my ruler to make sure I'm straight. And I'm going to chalk that line. Okay, all right. So that is on my lining side. But what's important is I need to flip this over and do the exact same line on the main side. So don't be fooled. Remember, this is my main fabric. So again, 5.5 inches from the top. A straight horizontal line. And there we go. Those are our first two lines we're doing. So if I'm following along, I can tick off that I just did step A, and I can tick off that box, okay? Alrighty. This is just to tell us where it's going to fold. So I'm putting it back over. The reason she does it on both sides is it helps you to see when you fold in, you can see the fold line, right? Whereas this line gives you the guide of where to bend it. Okay. So now I'm here. Now I'm going to do these diagonal lines that are going to help me make the shape. And you did this already when you were figuring out where to cut and position when we trim this edge. It was the same concept that you did. So we're going to go 1.5 inch in from my left side to start. Half. And I'm doing a chalk line up there. I want you to notice that I was a little skimpy, and it's okay because this is going to be hidden in my seam allowance. I already measured it. Okay, and then a 1.5 in from the other side. Sorry, yeah, 1.5 because we're doing the big one. Yeah. 1.5. Okay. There we go. Alrighty. I just want to make sure everyone's okay to that step. If you're not understanding, don't be shy. Shout it out. Okay. And then all I'm going to do is take that point there and align my ruler with my horizontal line, just like we did when we were cutting the angle for the front of our case. And we're going to have a skinny triangle that will be cutting away after. Do not cut it now. We're going to do some stitching before we cut it. And I'm going to do the same on the other spot. Okay, so there's my top piece shaped. And now I can tick off the box beside letter B. Okay, I've done the shaping lines at the top of the bag. And now I want to do part C and do the shaping points for the bottom edge of the bag. So if I look at figure 17, I am going to again measure in 1.5 inches from my side there. And just mark where that is. Down at the bottom. Okay. And then I'm gonna go 1.5 inch in from this side. Mark that. Okay. And this is where you might need a longer ruler, because this time my ruler is coming all the way back up. See that? I want to make sure everyone gets that.
Oh my goodness, I didn't do that.
Our tendency, the first time I did it, I was stopping there.
Yes, I did too.
Yeah, it's like because our brain sees that we only did that little part there. And it's like our brain says, okay, you just do the same little part. It's like we make assumptions. So you're going all the way back up to that fold line. Oh, I'm going to lose a tiny bit of an airplane, but not bad.
It's a huge difference.
It does make a huge difference. And your bag will actually close properly. Okay. So now it's almost looking like this one. I'll just need to round those edges. And so Annie was saying in the video, just want to point out, this is where we talk again about bias binding versus regular binding. Annie made the comment that it would be really hard to bind these angles. If you've ever tried to bind a corner that's not a 90-degree angle, it is so frustrating because you're trying to like get that miter on your corner and you can't. So that's why she rounds this, because bias binding stretches. And so we can just tug it around that corner. We don't have to like put the binding up. So if we were doing this like on a traditional piece, when we get to there, right, we'd fold it up and do the old 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock fold. Well, you can't do that because it's not a 90-degree angle. So this is really smart of her to round that corner so that we can use bias binding and make it a lot easier to bind. So you're going to need your 2.5-inch circle template. I've got these little ones that came in the Love Patchwork magazine years ago. I use those. And so basically I am lining up the outer edge of that plastic with the line, and then the outer edge of my template with this raw edge. And so there's not a lot of fabric there. You're not doing like a lot of cutting away. I'll use my red Frixion so you can see it better. Okay, so that rounded that edge of the corner. So you're not actually rounding here, but it'll give the illusion of being completely rounded by the time you're done. And then again,
Oh, we do the bottom too. Oh my God.
yep. Okay, so again, I've lined up edge of my template with my line I drew, other edge of my template with the raw edge, and I'll just trace the shape of that corner. Okay. And then we do the same at the other end. Annie uses the Creative Grids circle templates, and any of you do a lot of work with circles, they're great. It's like a package of 5 different circles, and they go all the way up to 5.5 inch. I've often had them in the store. I don't have them at the moment, but if that's something anyone does a lot of circle work with and you're interested, you can reach out. They are handy. I don't do enough circle work that the plastic ones are sufficient for my use. And so I recommend that you're going to use a 2.5-inch circle in every Annie bag that has a round shape. She always uses 2.5 inch. So I highly recommend you take the time to get a clear piece of plastic or a nice piece of cardstock or something, and just make yourself a circle and know where it is. Hole punch it, hang it up on a hook, whatever, because you'll use it a lot. In the beginning, I'd make myself a new copy of her thing every time, and I eventually got smart and said, why am I doing this every time? Like, get a system, Michelle. Everyone doing okay with their lines? Okay, so now you go to your sewing machine and you stitch 1/8 of a seam allowance in from basically that shape we've just drawn. And once you stitch down inside your lines, then you can go and cut right on the lines and everything stays together nice and secure. And then we get to bind it. It's going to be so exciting. You almost have a bag. When I start the stitching, I like to start on a long straight edge and then work my way around from there. Yeah, them too. Oops, what did I do there?
Side. This side. Just okay, that goes there.
when you are done stitching inside your lines, then your next step would be go ahead and cut out on your lines. Make sure you don't cut through that stitching.
Okay.
Cut on your lines. Annie says she used a combination of her rotary cutter and her scissors, so you could put your rotary cutter on that long straight line we drew. It is thick. If you have a 60-degree blade, it's easier to go through these 2 layers of soft and stable.
Yeah.
For me, I find I prefer to just use my big scissors to cut through it. And then I use my tinier scissors at the corners. So that's what I'm going to do.
Okay, there's.
Is this where we put the little piece on?
We will in a minute. Yes.
Oh,
Hang
okay.
loop.
We didn't have to do it when we went around. Okay.
Nope. So just get yourself to the spot that you have yours trimmed out. And have your hanging loop ready. Whoops. There we go. This is exciting. It's looking like a cutout bag now.
I just realized I should have used, like, you have where your white piece of trim is. I should have used a lighter color right there.
Okay. Well, that's where you can have fun on future ones with your accents. So that's where you can have fun getting scrappy with this too.
Yep, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll make sure that everybody has this part done and they have their hanging loop made. I know you've all got your binding.
Mm.
We're all good? We're all ready?
Mhm.
Woohoo! All righty. So, excuse me, I just having a couple almonds there for a snack. So we have now done all the way to the end of section B, and we're now going to go on to C, finish the case. And we're going to watch Annie's video on how she finishes it, and then we're going to go ahead and finish ours together today. Okay, so here we go. Everyone can see it?
Welcome back. We are so close to having our cut it out case finished. We just need to attach the hanging loop and bind the edges, and it will be ready to use. Because this is a small flat piece with rounded edges at the top and bottom, it's a great project to really perfect your binding skills. Let's get going. For step 5C, you will need the case which was shaped in the previous step, the hanging loop which was prepared in step 2C, and the bias binding which was prepared in step 2B. Because we're going around curved edges, bias binding is essential. It's the secret to attaching a beautiful binding on this project. The width of the binding is also very important, so make sure you've cut the binding at an accurate 2 1/4 inches. Fold the binding in half and pin it every 2 to 3 inches using extra fine point pins. Finally, a stiletto will be especially helpful for positioning and holding everything in place as you stitch. We'll start by attaching the hanging loop on the back of the case. Position the case with the back side up and the flap open at the top. Align the hanging loop about 1/4 inch below the marked fold line, positioning its raw edges along the outside of the raw edges on the left side of the case. If you are left-handed and angled the case front going the opposite direction, you may prefer to align it on the right side of the case. Either works. Just position and stitch in place, sewing twice through the loop about 1/8 inch from the edge. Trim any overhanging fabric even with the edges of the case and we'll be ready to bind the outer raw edges. We recommend attaching the binding for this project completely by machine, and because it's small and flat, it's a great project to really perfect your binding skills. I feel that the more visible part of the bag will be the flap, so I am going to start by attaching the binding first to the lining side of the flap. We also recommend that you join the ends of the binding with a diagonal seam. That doesn't add any bulk and it makes the join nearly invisible. And it's always easier to make that join where there's a bit of room to work. That would mean joining the binding along one of these long sides. If we join it just above the case front, we won't be sewing through a lot of layers and the join will be under the flap where it will be least visible. So start by positioning the case with the case front up and at the bottom. Position the end of the binding tail on the right side of the case with its diagonal end between the marked fold and the top bound edge of the case front. Align the long pinned raw edge of the binding with the raw edge of the case and begin stitching about 1 to 3 inches above the bottom right corner. As you stitch, be careful to align the raw edges of the binding with the raw edges of the case and to keep the binding really nice and smooth. You want to sew with a nice accurate 1/4 inch seam, and you want to make sure that your foot is staying parallel to the edge. Concentrate primarily on keeping the binding smooth and even with the edges and the foot parallel to the piece. If it's too hard to also keep an accurate 1/4 inch seam, you can let that slide a bit as long as you stitch narrower than that. You can always go back and refine the seam later. As we go around the top and bottom corners, we don't want to sew any creases in the binding. So just smooth it with your fingers as you go and gently ease it around those curved edges. Don't stretch it too much around the corners, but keep it smooth and flat. A stiletto really helps to hold it in place. Stop sewing about 1 to 2 inches past the top rounded corner. That gives us space to join the ends and finish attaching the binding. As I said, I prefer to join the ends of the binding with a diagonal seam so that it lies flat and isn't bulky. Here are the basic steps. First, move the tail at the beginning out of the way. Then pin the attached end of the binding to the case, stretching it slightly. Yellow-topped quilting pins work best for this as they don't bend. I remove the pins holding the edges of the binding together to avoid confusion. Position the beginning tail on top of the pinned binding and mark the points where the ends of the tail intersect with the binding below. I prefer to mark these with pins, being careful to pin through just one layer at each point. Leave those pins in place, but remove any other pins in each end of the binding. Then open out the binding and, using the pins as a guide, add about a 3/8 inch seam allowance to the end. Finally, join the ends of the binding and press the seam open. If you need more in-depth help with that, be sure to check out our beautiful bindings video or the add-on videos for Easy Does It or Peacekeeper. Once the ends have been joined, finish stitching the binding to the case. Finally, turn the binding to the other side, covering the outer raw edges. Before I stitch the binding down, I like to check all around the case, making sure that the folded edge falls just beyond the previous line of stitching which attached the binding. If it goes too far beyond that, I'll know that my stitching was a bit narrow, and I'll go back and refine the seam by stitching a seam that is a bit wider. I find this most likely to happen on the straight edges of the flap, since we're sewing through just a single layer of fabric stabilized with Soft and Stable there. It's less likely to happen around the corners, so I usually sew a slightly narrower stitch there. If the binding doesn't cover the line of stitching, I can either trim the edge a bit, take out my stitching and restitch, or use my stiletto to pull the binding into place. That usually works the best unless it's really off. Finally, stitch along the folded edge of the binding to secure it in place. Use the stiletto to position and hold the binding as you go, again making sure that the folded edge of the binding is just beyond the line of stitching that attached the binding. That ensures that your binding will look great on each side. And your case is finished. Remove the lines, give it a little press, being careful to avoid where the magnets are, and it's ready to go. You can insert your scissors into the case, fold over the flap, and secure the magnet. We hope you've enjoyed making Cut It Out and know that you'll appreciate being able to protect your scissors, snips, or other items in these handy cases. As you've worked, you've learned a number of techniques and skills that will carry over to other ByAnnie patterns, so you are well on your way to many bag making adventures. We can't wait to see what you make, so please be sure to share pictures of your finished projects with us. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube.
Okay, I'm just going to highlight myself too for a moment. All right. So a couple of comments that I just want to add to the way Annie does her binding. I have had no success trying to join the tails the way she shows it. I don't discourage you from trying that way, but it's not the way I'm going to teach you today. I'm going to join my binding tails the same way I shared with you when we did our Project Bag 2.0. And so that's how I will show it today, okay? I just find by her overlapping those fabrics, pinning, opening the fabric back up, drawing that line, then she's saying add about a 3/8 seam allowance. You're doing all that with fabric that has been cut on the bias and that wants to stretch really easily. So I don't know if I'm just needed to practice it more or not, but I tried it that way once and it was a hot mess. Did not work for me. So I'm just going to share that, but I don't just I encourage you to try it because you may find that it was the way that works for you. Okay. And you will also notice that Annie did sew it down from the back on this one, and I recommend you to do it her way for that. I tried sewing down this binding, doing it the same way I did for the small piece. It just didn't work well for such a big project. I found it difficult to ensure that I was keeping my binding wrapped enough. So we will do it Annie's way and stitch our binding from the back to complete it as the very last step. Okay, so any questions there? I am going to walk you through putting on the loop and everything. We're going to do that all together. Okay. We may go about 5-10 minutes late at the most, but that should be all. We should be able to get this done. Okay. So, if you're a person who likes to read as you go along, then we're on page 9 in section C, finish the case. So with the case facing lining side up looking at me, all right, I've got the back side up. I'm aligning it on the left side of the case. So that means that when you turn it over, we're actually putting it on the right side, okay? Because if we put it on the right side when we flip it, that means it's on the left side when we look at it from this perspective. So turn yours over to the back, grab your loop. If you already had sewed your two little short ends together, that's okay. It's probably a smart thing. It'll help it stay in place. And basically, she says you're going to position it. I believe it's 1/4 inch. I'm just going to double check. Yes. She said about 1/4 inch below that fold line that we drew and line it up with the raw edge of your fabric. So I'll just put my ruler down here as a guideline. There's 1/4 inch with my fold line. And I'll put it right there. And I'll just put a little clip to hold it until I go to my sewing machine. Okay, so you're going to take this to your sewing machine, and here's what you're going to do, because you want to stitch over this, I'd say 3 times is ideal. So basically start up here where your fold line is, because I always like to start a couple stitches before, so I make sure I'm really secured in my stitch. And I'm going to stitch, I can just follow this 1/8 line I already stitched, right? I could stitch right over it. And I'm going to stitch over it. You can either back stitch, or with your needle down, you can pivot like that and sew back over. And then if you want, you can pivot again and sew over the 3rd time and go a little bit past. So that's how we're going to secure our hanging loop in. So let's all do that step at our machines.
Okay. Oh, that's a big one. Okay.
Okay, so now I have that tacked into place.
Okay, that's not going to work.
And again, says if you end up with a little bit of your loop past the raw edge, just trim it away.
This is not work either.
Can I help anyone?
No.
Is that Etta?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to make my bias again. I'm not happy with the width of it when it gets thick.
Okay.
At the bottom,
Yes.
I just find it won't pull over enough. So I'll remake it just a little bit wider.
A little bit wider. Okay.
So
Yeah,
and
it's
it's only
you can
bias.
cover
So,
it. Yeah.
yeah, so it's not the end of the world.
Okay. So now we're ready to put on our binding. So again, it's easiest. So we're going to flip it so that now the back side is up. Alrighty. Oh, I wanted to tell you, sorry, what I do with this. I put a pin in my hanging loop because I've had the experience before, been sewing along and not noticed that it flipped back and sewed through it.
Mm,
And I was like, that's only going to happen to me once.
I use painter's tape
That's
because
another good idea. Then you don't have to worry about pins.
I stab myself with pins all the time when I do stuff like that.
Painter's tape is an excellent suggestion. So yes.
Cheap.
Yep. No, that's great. There's so many little gadgets that you can use that aren't meant for sewing that are very useful. Okay. So now we're front side up. And like Annie said, when it's time to join the tails, it's easier to join them up in this area where you only have a single layer to sew through. And let's see if you can see it on mine. Actually, you can see it better from the back. My join was right there. And actually, I ended up joining just below that front. But oh well, that's okay. It worked for me. Mine turned out nice. I just took my time. Might have ripped a couple stitches out along the way, not gonna lie. Repositioned it. But it turned out very nice in the end. So, one tip is pick the end of your bias binding where you don't have a seam for a while. Because like as I go along, there's a seam. I don't want to start with a seam up near here because when I trim my two ends, I'll have two seams really close together and then that'll be bulky. So I actually kind of audition my binding. I do this even on quilts to make sure that where my seams are won't end up in the corners. So if we're going to do that and leave a tail, I audition it to make sure I just roughly go around the quilt to make sure that I won't end up with seams in an awkward place. There's one, that's no big deal. But ooh, I'm getting a seam right in the fold line. I don't know, is that going to make it bulkier? It might. I don't have one in the fold line on my prototype. Let's just see how far I could get here. So you can see, look at, I have a lot of extra fabric, don't I? So I'm gonna shift this then, and I'm gonna move you up and put a little bit more that way and reposition, and that's nicer. Now I'm gonna have that seam. I moved the seam down so it's not gonna be right in my fold. And then look, I've still got tons. So that's why I always audition binding on anything I'm putting binding on. Okay. So I'm going to start here. Now my tail is a little bit long. That's okay because I'm not going to finish mine the way Annie is doing hers. So I'm actually going to clip that in place. Now, if this is your first time doing bias binding and you're feeling a little nervous about it, it's totally okay to put in pins. So just let me grab my pins. They're out of my reach. Because bias binding could be a little scary at first. Curves seem to scare us as quilters, probably because the first thing we do is drill into you how to sew a straight line, and we beat you over the head with sew a straight line, sew a straight line, sew a quarter inch. And then now we say, but sometimes don't always sew a straight line. So if you are worried about it, pin them in place. I just pin it through, as long as I get through the top layer and the soft and stable, my pin's not going all the way through. It doesn't have to be. It's just to keep this in place. And you're going to see you have a little tug on it. Don't tug it. It's meant to lie where it naturally wants to lie. We use that little bit of tugging only when we have to get around corners. Okay, so I'm going to position it here. And I am going to have you watch me sew it, and you could see it on Annie's. When you get to this corner, here's what's going to happen. And it is totally natural and expected. As you start to sew and round that corner, I'm making sure that the raw edge of my binding is lined up with the raw edge here. That's all that matters. Do not worry about the fact that you feel like you have way too much fabric here and it's puckering up. You got to look past that and ignore it. All that matters is that the fabric where you're sewing through stays flat and that you don't end up puckering it up and doing something like this, for example, where you bend the fabric and then you fold it accidentally and sew through extra layers. That's the only thing we don't want happening. It's hard to pin these in place. You can do it, but don't be committed to those pins. You may have to shift and move it a bit when you get there. But you can certainly, if this gives you a little bit of a security blanket, you can go around and pin it all in place. I don't typically. I get the first bit secured in with clips or a couple of pins because I find lifting and positioning it and holding it there with my stiletto is a really easy way to guide it along. So I'll move over to my camera and my sewing machine so you can watch me do it. And then we'll have everybody give it a try. Okay. There we go. See if we can get a little closer for you. Okay. So I'm using my 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I want to leave enough tail there for joining. Actually, you know what? I'm going to start sewing. So I'm going to rewind it. Even though I've got all this extra tail here, I'm probably just going to end up start sewing in here, which means I am going to be joining it somewhere in there. But watch, because when I get to joining it, you'll find out with the angled line, I'll end up probably only sewing through a single layer of soft and stable. So I'm going to start here. Whoops. Sorry about that. Here we go. And so I use that stiletto to watch and to make sure that my ridge and my binding is staying there, because as you get near the curves, the tendency is that the binding wants to start traveling inward. Annie pins the 2 layers of binding there together to hold them in place. I don't find I need to do that. I have it pressed really well. I don't do that. The more pins they are, the more chances I can stab myself. Okay, so when you get to here, this is where people worry because they see this excess fabric puckered up. Just move it out of the way as best as you can. I'm just holding it down there with my finger. And all that matters is that when I'm sewing through here, there's no pucker where my needle's gonna hit. That's all that matters. And if you start sewing along, I'm watching my edge to make sure. Notice I'm only going 2 or 3 stitches and then I reposition. I'm about to sew through a pucker. I can see my fabric is folded here. So I'm just going to lift my presser foot and ease that and smooth it out of the way. And now it's flat again. I'm going to take that pin out of there. I really don't want to sew through that. Okay, and then I might have to do that again. And this will just be on your corners. You'll have to do a little bit of playing. But it'll be worth it because you'll have a really nice looking bound corner. Okay. Pivot. I don't have my knee bar on my machine, but this is where if you have a knee bar to be able to lift your presser foot, it really helps.
Okay.
So you can just see this is just a very, you take your time, you go slowly, and you make sure that you're covering those raw edges. Then you're all happy because you get around that one corner. Now you have a little rest where you're just doing a regular straight line. Now, as I'm approaching this corner, there's a bit of an angle there. Okay, that's at my fold line, and there's that little angle. So slow right down, and this is where, can you see how the natural line of the fabric, if it's carrying on, it's the wrong angle to my cutout. So this is where the bias helps me because I hold it in place with my stiletto and then move it to the shape I need. Remember, this pucker doesn't matter because it only matters what's under my needle. Has to be flat. There we go. And now I'm around that. Then I watch when I'm coming to that next corner. Yeah, slow and steady wins the race when you're going around the corners. I love how Annie does it on her video. I suppose that's partly editing. It looks like she did it. It was like 2 seconds of work. Okay, so make sure I get that other tail out of the way. And I'm just gonna sew to just about that fold line for me. Okay, and I'm gonna back stitch. Alrighty. So now I'll review how we did this before. Okay. So when we did this, when I showed you this on the project bag 2.0, we start by moving, we move that tail out of the way. Okay, we're gonna, whoops, sorry. We're gonna put this one so that I'm gonna cut it so that it's like halfway between the two tails, cutting off a piece. Okay. So now I will put that tail back over. And I'm lining up, sorry, meant to put in there. Put that one down on my first one. Put that one back over it. And then I cut off that excess from my top one. Okay. Now, because this is bias binding, I cut it like about a 1/16 of an inch too short. Won't matter because I've got bias. I'll be able to fit it into place, no problem. I'll have enough. Okay, so now I've got those two tails, and this is the part where we have to do our diagonal line. I find it helps to get this bulk out of the way. So I just squish it up and I put a big wonder clip to hold it in place. Actually, no. I'm gonna have to use a pin for this one because my clip's gonna be in the way. All right, come on here. That'll do it. All right. I left them a little bit too short. So now I take that one. I put them right sides together. And if you want to pin them in place, you can. It's awkward because I should have left my tail longer. Or, I mean, not my tail. I should have left a wider opening between my two tails. That's why this is awkward. I sewed too far. And now I'll take that over to my machine and I will sew a 45-degree line corner to corner to join my two tails. So I'm just gonna, not gonna move my camera for this, just gonna do this quickly. Come on here. Okay. before I trim off that excess, and I did stray a little bit, so that's why I'm checking before I trim it. I just want to make sure I can make this work. It's a little sloppy, so really I should take that out and do that tail again. So what went wrong is I didn't leave enough opening in here. Okay, usually I like to leave about 5 inches, and that was kind of skimpy. So I'm going to fix this again later off camera, but I want to show you that now I'd have my tails joined. And so now this is where we press it to the back. And the cool thing is with this, it just automatically curls over really nicely with the curves, and they want to go to the back. I also like to press with an iron, and I like to actually go to my iron and press that seam flat and away, because then when I turn it over, it's easier to pull to the back. So I'm going to pull it all the way around to the back, and you're going to find that the reason we're going to sew this from the back is this is 4 layers here now. When we did just this little piece, it was only going through 2 layers of fabric and 1 soft and stable. But now we're going through 2 layers of soft and stable. And so it's snugger. Like Etta, you were saying you're going to have to cut yours again and make it wider. It's a lot snugger now. So I'm going to clip it in place really well all the way around. And as Annie said, like say when I get here, even with coaxing, it's not quite covering that stitch line. So I can just go and slightly trim this away. And that's what I'm going to do. Not much, like I'm probably doing a 1/16 at the most. There, now that closes over nicely. And I'll cover my stitching. So that's what I'll do. I'll keep going around like that. And I will clip them in place. I really am a big fan of clipping them in place. Lots of clips. And I'm going to
Could
stitch.
you go over,
Go ahead.
oops, sorry.
No,
Could you go over just one more time when you're joining the 2 pieces of binding? It's right sides together?
Yep, here I can show you with, I've got some extra binding here, so we can pretend. Okay. Right, so you're coming along and then your 2 tails are now overlapping.
Yeah.
Okay, so what you do is, I'm going to use the shorter tail. So say this is where my sewing ended, and I've got that opening. Usually I find I like to do about a good 5 inches. So it's a little trickier on these smaller pieces. Could be part of the reason why Annie's figured out that method she has done. But for me, this method works if I take my time. Okay, so when they're back like that, now what I do is I'm gonna flip this one to where it's in the middle and snip off because I'll have too much, okay? So let's just pretend I already snipped that. That was my excess. So that now I've narrowed the space down to like, instead of this wide, it's half that opening now, okay? That piece I cut off becomes my ruler because that piece is the same width, right? Before I folded it. So that becomes my ruler. And then I put that tail back over it. And then I cut away that excess. You see how I'm going, so that'll be the same width as my piece I have in the middle.
Got it.
Okay, I cut that away. Now I know that when I join these, I take this one away now. Now I know that when I go to join these and sew them, the length will be right. So then here's what I do. I open this one up, and again, right sides up. Okay, so that one is there right side up. And then you have to wiggle and manipulate with your fabric, but then I do it so that I manipulate the other one right sides up. and I'm putting them corner to corner. See how my other fabric's under there? Corner to corner. And then I stitch.
And are they right facing together?
Correct. Yep, right sides facing together. It's hard to tell with white. So if I had,
Mhm.
let me just see here what I've got in my scrap bin. This will do it. So if this were my binding fabric, yes, it would be right sides together. Okay. And I would sew that 45-degree line from corner to corner. And then when I stitch that, I like to open it up first and make sure it all sewed correctly. And when I can see that it's sewed correctly, and I can fold it up like that, and it's the right length when it's halfways, well, then I'll peel it back and trim away that excess triangle, right? Just leave a 1/4 inch seam past my stitching. So I'd like everybody to at least start putting it on. Make sure that you feel okay about that. I know we've gone like 10 minutes past, but we started like almost 10 minutes late anyways. So we'll stay on like for till 2:20, so it's like 12 minutes, just to make sure everybody's got the concept of what they're gonna do here. And you'll have the recording to go through it. And I'm gonna pick out my stitch. So I'm going to show you a tip. What I just did there, because I found that it was too small an area to try to work with and sew these tails. The easy fix is I'm just going to release some of my sewing from this end so that I have longer bit of fabric to work with. All I'm going to do is unpick a few stitches. This isn't the first time I've done this. And Pam's laughing, and I'm pretty sure it won't be the last. See, mistakes are fun because you learn how to fix them then, and that's empowering because then you gain better understanding of how things actually work. And if you're thinking, if you're sitting there going, there's no way I want to try to stitch this other side down by machine, if that's just not jiving with you, or you're feeling uncomfortable about it, or you think you're not going to like the look in case you see the thread on the other side, go ahead and stitch this down by hand. Nothing's stopping you.
I was just laughing with you, Michelle. I've spent a lot of this class unpicking. So
Oh no, Pam. Is it working though when you do it again the next time?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
Okay, it didn't work for me putting the facing to facing because when I go to put it back again, am I supposed to put the one on the right down first?
Yep, nope, the one on the left is on the
Okay, so
bottom and the one on the right goes over top of it, face to face.
did that.
Mhm.
And yeah, so they're facing each other, the good side to good side.
And then start at the top left corner. It's really important you sew, if you can see mine here, I'm just getting it in the camera view. It's really important that you sew from the top left down to the bottom right.
Well, of course I did the top right.
Yep, been there, done that. Sorry I didn't say it. If you do it that way, yeah, they won't open up and tuck into each other. Top left to bottom right.
Um,
That's better. When you join those tails, you can just like finger press the seams open to reduce bulk. I just kind of use my nail to crease it down.
Measure 8 times, cut once.
Michelle twisted hers.
Mine's all twisted.
I hope you feel better because I did the exact same thing as you and twisted them when I was putting the right on top of the left side. So that is my cue that it's time to stop and have a snack
That's
and perhaps a glass of Earl Grey tea.
The problem is when you sit it aside, you'll find this unfinished project in 10 years.
No, you're not allowed to do that. This is going to get fixed like tomorrow or later today, but it's just
Oh, I fixed it.
it's the cue that your brain's getting tired.
Oh, mine's getting sewn right now.
The good news is I can easily fix it just by undoing it. I'll fix it right now.
I didn't listen to the part about where you sewed your binding together. Don't do it there. That's what happened.
So you did it there?
Well, I've got too many pieces just kind of joining in one spot.
Yeah.
But the iron will help that.
Yep. And if you have some acorn precision treatment or some other type of like best press or flatter or squirt some of that on, that'll help get it.
Okay.
I think I'm doing this one right this time. Third time was not the charm. I did it again. Michelle is pausing.
You're tired.
Yep, I'm tired. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I've decided I'm going to hand sew the binding down.
Yep.
I guarantee you, I never
Let's see,
decide that.
Pat, hold it up. I'm going to spotlight you and see your pretty fabrics. Okay, go ahead. Oh, that's very nice. Now close it and we
So-
see. Yeah. you used the
But
yellow from the other kit.
I decided to hand sew it down.
Yep.
So,
It is bulky. And like when I
yeah.
made the two practicing, I did it all by machine, but I found I had to go back and kind of re-stitch over a couple of areas because I hadn't caught it all. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But looks cute. Anyone else? Oh, look at Pam's. Let's spotlight Pam.
Oh, nice.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
You're done the whole thing. Bravo.
She came late too.
And she ripped out stitches. Okay, you're hired for the next class. You're the teacher. And look at your project bag. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you for
That's
sharing.
fine.
Okay, let's do Deborah.
A little on the wild side, but that's me.
Oh, wild is good. I
Yeah.
like that.
Oh.
Very pretty. Is that K facet or different?
No, it's not cave.
Okay.
Well, hold on, I don't know.
It looks
Yeah.
like similar, but I don't recognize it, but it looks like his kind of idea, but
Yeah, I had it left over from my GeoGire that I did,
Yeah.
so I don't know where that came from.
that's cool. I like it. It's nice fabric. All righty. Where's Etta? Is she here or did she head out? Etta's gone. Okay.
Okay, let's see. See if I
All
can
righty.
get this.
So everybody, you finish yours. If you're in our I think you're all in our Facebook group. Share your creations. Love to see
Yeah.
your picture of it. And I'm going to see many of you on the second session, but that won't be until June 22nd. So there's a little break.
Well, that's a Sunday, right?
Yes, we've switched it to Sunday for the next,
Okay, I just wanted to make sure you had the right date. Okay.
just
I'm good.
because I want to keep you on your toes.
I got enough people around me to keep me on my toes. I don't need somebody else.
No, the real reason I did it is that sometimes there are people who say I can't, I'm like Saturdays never work for me. So I'm like, we'll do the next session for Sundays. And but again, the recording's still there. So
And you know what? Everybody else is doing their classes on Saturdays.
there you go. So it gives you a chance to be busy all weekend.
And that's what happened to me. Like, what was
Yeah.
that the second class? Yeah.
And same with us because we're trying to schedule in-person classes on Saturdays because that's when most of the people who attend in person
Yeah.
prefer them on Saturday because a lot of them are still working.
I am dropping by your shop on June 10th on my way
Ooh,
home from New Brunswick.
awesome.
Plan it that way.
My gosh. So I have
It's
to
a
make sure
Tuesday.
I'm there. So let's connect on that to remind me.
Yes,
Because
I'll send you a reminder because the first time I started dealing with you guys, of course, I come home on a Monday. So that I got smart, eh? I leave New Brunswick on a Monday. I pass by Prestwick on a Tuesday.
awesome.
Boop, off the highway.
No, I'd like to be
Good.
there to see you, Deborah.
Yeah.
My mom and dad, we're moving them either the 9th or the 10th. So
Oh, okay.
movers are moving them. So I don't have to be available while the movers are doing their stuff.
Yeah, but we usually
from
hit your
there.
store like first thing.
Yeah, perfect.
We usually, 10:30, 10, yeah, about 10:30-ish. Yeah.
So that'll work
So
out great because the movers will be doing their thing and I'll go down to the store to
great.
perfect. But
I
remind
told
me.
all my friends to put in orders for you and I'll pick them up. So
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, everyone enjoy the rest of the Easter
Yeah,
weekend.
I might see you on Mother's Day weekend.
Are you going to the quilt show?
No, I'm going to Montreal on the 9th.
Ooh, nice.
Which
Okay.
quilt show?
In Ottawa.
Oh, it's on
Oh.
my calendar. Yes.
So on the 9th, I'll
That's a Friday.
Friday, I'll be at the Ottawa show working. The store will be open,
Yeah.
but I'm working at the Ottawa show on the Friday and possibly the
And
Saturday.
then we come home on Tuesday.
What
Okay.
time is it open till at night?
7 p.m. on the Friday night.
Oh, fabulous. Is that at the RA Center?
No, Nepean Sportsplex.
Oh, that's perfect.
It's a good location. Tons of free parking.
Yeah, I'll be living
Yeah.
at my campsite then, which is near there. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's the 9th
Okay.
from 10 a.m. till 7 p.m. And then the Saturday, the 10th, I believe it's either 10 to 4 or 10 to 5. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope I'll catch
Well,
everyone on their travels. Do my
I may
best.
try on the Tuesday then to see you.
Yep, Tuesday would, yeah, that'll be, yep. And again, just remind me, because when people are coming from out of town, I love to see you guys. Just don't be shy to shoot an email reminding when you're coming so that they,
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
yeah, can be
Will do.
I will send a reminder.
Thank
okay.
you, Michelle.
Thank you.
I've
Thank
enjoyed
you.
this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
I'm glad. Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye, everyone.